Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video I have the latest from the live radar. Run for the latest UK view, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as things are going to be fairly mixed as we progress toward the end of March. The next couple of days do look fairly chilly and increasingly unsettled, but it's not a massive change and it will probably be drier once again as we do head into early next week. As we progress into the longer range, though, we have got some real headaches starting to appear, as we have spoken about numerous times in the past few videos in the last couple of weeks. We are going to be seeing a tropospheric response to the sudden stratospheric warming, but what will that tropospheric response be? Now, the main models today all are producing significant blocking. But significant blocking in spring doesn't necessarily mean cold conditions. Now, if we were in January, then yes, we would be saying we're looking pretty likely to go very cold. Cold options is still there, but as we'll see, especially from the GFS, if that block doesn't get too far northwards and actually sits over the top of us, synoptically, it's not actually a big difference to the ECMWF, for example, which tries to pull in northeasterlies. Not a big difference at all when we look at the grand scheme of things, but at the surface, my gosh, there would be a drastic shift. The GFS, 20 degrees, that's what the sort of temperatures we'd be seeing. Nothing absolutely insane, the air mass isn't that warm, but with dry, still conditions, strong sunshine, very warm. ECMWF, that height, slightly further northwards, encouraging the wind to come in from the North Sea and Scandinavia, more like mid to high single digits. So very little differences between the runs today, but drastic shifts at the surface could be seen. So yeah, going to cause some real headaches, I suspect, over the next few days. So no, do remember, if you enjoy my video, do like and subscribe. Remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you start on the live radar, generally speaking, it's a dry evening. We're recording this just after 8 PM. And you can see there is a bit of rain moving into the far northwest at the moment. And this is some weaker weather fronts that are moving in. Now, they are initially pretty weak, and as they move southwards and eastwards, will not really produce much in the way of precipitation. But progressively through Thursday and Friday, it will start to pep up, and we'll see further weather fronts to have a lot more strength within them, pushing southwards, and we are all likely to see a bit of rain as we progress into the weekend. Now, the temperatures this evening aren't too cold, fairly mild in most areas, but really nothing deviating too much from average, a couple of degrees here or there. Now, to go over to the latest UKV now, you can see as we progress through this evening, that weather front continues to push in, but really doesn't do much through Thursday morning. Progressively, though, through Thursday afternoon, the precipitation starts to pep up once again, and we start to see a proper cold front starting to form. We can see that from these squall features, which is line convection along the cold boundary with the warmer air. So we are going to see potentially some really quite heavy, squally rain within that. So it could be pretty intense for a short period of time, but that squall feature does disintegrate away as it shifts southwards and eastwards. Still perhaps a bit of banding there, but fizzling away. So yes, some rain in the southeast through Friday morning, but we're not expecting anything too much. Maybe a couple of hours to light to moderate rain. Wintry showers and generally widespread hefty showers further northwards and westwards, with a cold northwesterly wind pushing in. And that looks like it could be the theme through the rest of Friday into Saturday. So pretty cold conditions, potentially temperatures down towards freezing overnight, but it's not lasting too long. As we progress into Saturday, another weather front moves through. Again, hopefully not too much in the way of heavy rain, but it will change the air mass once again. It will go slightly milder for a time, and then progressively into early next week. Again, lots of westerly winds. Some cooler air, some milder air, just generally up and down. Now, if you look at the max temperatures, you can see as we progress into Thursday, temperatures hovering around average or slightly above average for the time of year, 14 to 17 degrees. But that's more in the south and the east. As we progress into Friday, temperatures will turn much cooler. By the afternoon, maybe 13, 14 in the far southeast, high single digits or even mid-single digits further northwards and westwards, and overnight temperatures, especially rurally and further northwards and westwards, dropping down towards freezing. As we head through the rest of Saturday, temperatures cooler, definitely, not getting much above 11 or 12 degrees, but hopefully quite a bit of sunshine. As we progress into Sunday, still cool. Temperatures around the low to mid-teens, but slowly increasing. And you can see by Monday, they're back towards those mid-teens, around the 15 to maybe 18 degree mark, so starting to get a little bit warmer. Of course, we are at the point where mid to high teens will become more of a regular occurrence, and we don't need particularly warm air masses to get those sorts of temperatures. Same as like in July, 22 or 23 degrees is the average temperature in London. And that sounds very warm right now, but come July, that's average. That's a kind of a bog standard day. So we're slowly seeing those sort of average temperatures creeping up. And this is pretty much the time of year where that increase is pretty rapid. In the space of a few weeks, we could be looking at widespread 18, 19, 20 degrees most days come sort of late April, early May, if we are lucky. We don't see any cool patterns developing. But who knows this year? Definitely there is the prospects for that. Now, do have a look at those longer range ones. We'll be able to see all the discrepancies in surface conditions, because synoptically, i.e. at the pressure level, there's not too much difference between the runs today. Westerly flows over the coming days, but high pressure building in to start April. Now it sits over the top of it and it tries to ridge northwards. There's some potentially temporary cooler air masses at times, but generally speaking, it's sat over the top of us, doesn't do much. For the UK, that is. Elsewhere, across other parts of Europe, yes, colder air does move in for a time, especially across Eastern Europe, Scandinavia, into parts of North America. But for the UK, yes, cooler air could shift through at times. But if we go back to perhaps in around 8 or 9 days' time, look at this, high pressure right over the top of us. If it's slightly further northwards, we'd be drawing in cool easterly winds. But it's not. It's sat directly over the top of us. And if we do zoom in, look at those temperatures, 17 to 19 degrees. And if we look at the 3 p.m. temperatures, getting even up to 19 or 20. So very, very warm. Overnight, cool, maybe 4 or 5 degrees, still very cold nights, even with warmer upper air temperatures. But it just shows you the power of the sunshine with still mild air this time of year. But the most important thing is synoptically, it isn't too far away from the runs we're about to look at, which do threaten much colder conditions. Now, if you compare to the GM, broadly very similar, westerly flow, that high pressure eventually builds in, but it's slightly, ever so slightly further northwards. And what that means is cooler easterly flows threaten. Now, it's not a direct easterly, it's more of just a chilly easterly flow because that high pressure is still a little bit too far southwards. But if you look at the surface temperatures, you'll be able to see drastic difference. Look at that midday, same time frame as the GFS, 7 to 10 degrees. And again, synoptically, very, very similar. Or even just, I'll directly compare it synoptically out to what we're looking at here, the 4th of April. We go back to the 4th of April here. Synoptically speaking, you can see they are very, very similar. Not much shift, very strong agreement. But we zoom into the surface. Look at those 2 meter temperatures, 20 degrees from the GFS. The GEM, as we just saw, all the way down to 7 to 10 degrees. So it's all about that exact orientation, the exact positioning of the high and the cool airflow. So at the moment, a lot of our videos recently have been talking about cold potential, and that still is true. But you can just see how a small, tiny, in the realm of the uncertainty within these models, shift can change it from being cold, being frosty, particularly the nights here, down towards freezing, to something very, very warm. So I know there will be comments, people saying, you said it was going to be very cold, you said it's going to be very warm. This is just evidence that it is impossible to say, even at day 8, day 9, what we're going to see. Because even though the synoptics are very, very similar, which they're normally not, even though they're very, very similar, the surfing conditions are drastically different. And it's all because we have this slight easterly flow, whereas on the GFS, we don't have that easterly flow and the air is stagnant. So very, very subtle shifts make all the difference here. And we can see further on the latest ECMWF is a bit more amplified. Westerly flow, the high pressure is over the top of us, and actually, like the GFS, it's probably pretty warm here out towards the 4th of April. You can see it's not fully loaded here, but out to the 3rd of April, 18 or 19 degrees in the far south. But that's not going to tell the full picture, because look out to the northeast, cooler, colder air is heading our way. So even though, yes, perhaps similar out to day 8, day 9, you can see imminently cold northeasterly winds will be arriving. So a lot more amplified here from the ECMWF. So we have to keep a very, very close eye on this. It's not just about the pressure patterns, the synoptic charts. They're looking very similar just by that GM and the GFS. It's about the exact wind direction and the exact upper air temperatures and where that air is originating. If it's mild air from the east, then it's probably going to be pretty dry and relatively mild, but still pretty cold. But if it's warm air, mild air from the south, it's probably going to be more humid, risk of thunderstorms, and probably even warmer conditions. So all of that makes such a huge difference, especially this time of year when we've got very cold air nearby and very warm air nearby. So it means that, I suspect we're going to see some big swings within the models. And I do suspect I am going to be wrong, at least in some of my predictions in the coming days. I'm almost putting a disclaimer out there saying that some of these videos will call it very cold next week or very warm next week, and it could be the complete opposite. Now, if you look at the latest ensembles, you can see a big drop in temperatures over the next couple of days. That's that colder, cooler air moving in as we head into the weekend, and then rising above average into next week. And to start April, you can see most of the GFS ensembles agree with the operational run, which is for mild or perhaps warmer first 3 or 4 days of April. But then you can see there is a drop-off. There are some much cooler runs starting to appear. But I suspect the most of the ensembles will be similar to the GFS operational. Normally when the operational has an idea, most of the other ensembles do have a similar idea. Not all of them, but majority. And you can see that here from a pretty strong correlation here, a good 5+ degrees above average there for the first 3, 4, 5 days of April before it does moderate. So very interesting seeing that. You can see the sea level pressure is very high. We're expecting that from all the runs. They're all in very strong agreement. And you can see there is a little spike appearing of temperatures more into the mid to high teens, maybe even up towards 20 degrees. So again, we'll have to see for that. Now, finally, if we compare to the ECMWF, unfortunately, the midday run hasn't fully come out yet. But if we look at the midnight run, very similar. Bit of that warmer spike there into early April, and then it cools down once again. So perhaps we've seen a bit of a flip today, that although, yes, those colder opportunities are still there, perhaps the model is a little bit more on board with those those warmer scenarios, So again, we'll have to wait and see, but I would not be surprised if this flipped once again as we head into tomorrow. So it really is one to just keep a very close eye on those models and just see where we end up as we head into next week. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.